Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, and I'm coming back with another exciting Alpha Strike Battlytics review from our tournament that's being held on Patreon. This is another one of the round one matchups that I really loved, and this is between the Ion Raiders and the Rolling Sevens. These were two really well designed lances. Really excited to show you what we've got going on. So just a quick refresher, it is a single elimination seeded bracket tournament. So basically 24 teams, the top 8 basically got a bye round for round one. The other 16 teams competed in 8 different matchups. The winners advance, the losers are out. So guys, this is high stakes stuff here. So stay tuned, we're going to dive in and we're going to see what these lances can do. It's coming right up. All right, guys, here we are. So if you haven't checked out the last Alpha Strike Battlytics review that we did for this tournament, check it out. I went through a lot of the sort of the new capabilities that we built in, tracking some new stats. We sort of revisualized some things. And appreciate everybody's feedback, of course, on all of this stuff, and especially to our patrons, and the chats that we have there on Patreon. Really great stuff that the ideas you guys have, fantastic. So anyway, let's start with the Ion Raiders. So guys, this is a lance submitted by John from Ion Radio. Ion Radio is a partner channel of ours, and they're just fantastic guys. A lot of fun. Big BattleTech fans. They have some classic BattleTech on their YouTube channel. They have a whole campaign using the DFA campaign rules, and they also have some Alpha Strike Games Clan Invasion stuff. And then they're working through, at least at the point of this, they're working through an Alpha Strike campaign as well using the DFA rules. So very exciting, and they have some great content and some neat stuff. So definitely check those guys out over at Ion Radio on YouTube. So John and Ken both submitted a lance. I'm going to take a look at the one that this particular matchup was great here, John's matchup. Let's talk about his lance. What did he come up with? I thought this was real solid. Lots of mechs I like. The awesome 8Q in the late Succession Wars era. This thing is a boss. It's tough as nails. 8 armor, 6 structure, just damage across the board. Which makes me cry a little bit because when I look at the numbers, it's actually the same damage output as the Adder Prime. It just lacks the overheat long, which is crazy because the Adder's like 1/3 the size of this thing. But clan tech. Anyway, in this particular era, the awesome is great. It is slow as turds, but you know what? It can deal damage at range, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference, and it still gets that TMM of 1, so overall not too bad. The Marauder 3D, another good one, solid at short and medium, can do some damage all the way out to extreme range, does have that overheat ability, which I love, and it does have 6 pips of armor and structure, which is sort of like, table stakes benchmark for a heavy, for me, at least. I do prefer, if I can just digress for a moment, I like the 3R a little bit better because I don't really tend to get into short range, and I like having that extra point of damage at long and extreme, but otherwise the mechs are very identical and are actually identically priced. The 3D is an energy mech, so if you do happen to take an ammo critical, that can be life-saving. So great mech, the 3D. Both the Awesome and the Marauder are deployed in Vanguard roles. That means they're going to be in the middle, looking for trouble. And they're backed up by a Rifleman 3N, and that's in a direct fire role. I like the 4D better than the 3N because you get that extra point of damage at long, so it gives you a pip of damage at extreme range, but it costs 1 more point than the 3N, and John maxed out his points here at 150. So it is what it is, but this mech's still very good if you can get it into medium range. It's got that overheat too, that's where it shines. You can just blast 4 pips of damage out. Of course, it's got that Achilles heel on the armor side, only 4 pips of armor, 5 in structure, so it is very fragile, but I think the direct fire roll hopefully will serve this well. And then you've got the Phoenix Hawk 1K. This is in a pursuit role. I think that's pretty good for this mech. We'll see how that shakes out. It does have a TMM of 2. It's got solid armor for a 45-ton mech. Does great damage at short range. That's where you want to get it. The question is it going to survive? Because that Awesome and the Marauder are much slower, so it may outpace them and end up getting chewed up quick. We'll have to see. So some key force markers here. Pilots, right around 3. That's good. So average of, about a little over skill 3 average. The weighted damage is also good, right around a 3. That's what you kind of expect for this 150-point bracket. Armor is good, a little low, under 6. That's probably the rifleman pulling down that average. But structure also solid, over 5 for structure. And speed, of course, down around 4. Awesome. Rifleman, Marauder, they're all pretty slow. The Phoenix Hawk, the only thing really above 4. So, take a look at the rolling 7s here. These guys fighting for the Federated Suns. Ironically, John, also a big Federated Suns fan. His unit fighting for the Federated Suns as well. So a little Suns on Suns action here. But let's take a look at these rolling 7s. Another really well-designed lance. I mean, at first blush, I'm like, wow, this is like quintessential fire support lance here. But it does have some caveats. So start with the big boy, the Archer. It's a Vanguard roll. It's a veteran skill level, 47 points, so it's not cheap. But it is the same as the Awesome. So armor-wise, it's also very similar, just 1 pip less than the Awesome, but does have that overheat. So, overall damage-wise, it's similar to the Awesome, and at medium range with the overheat, it could be a little bit better. The next thing here we've got is a Catapult C1. Now, this isn't a strike roll, so that means it's going to start on the flank and it's going to work its way in. I think that's the right play for this mech. When you think about a Catapult, you're like, fire support. But really, it's a medium-range mech. It's got 4 medium lasers on it. Yeah, it's got those twin 15s, but they're low on ammo, and all that factors into your damage output in Alpha Strike. Like, if it had more ammo, this thing would have more long-range damage, but it just doesn't. And so it's got that overheat 1, which is helpful, can bring that medium-range punch up to 4, which is nasty. So, not bad. And then armor, 5 and 5, respectable. Jump jets could also be useful, bump that TMM up. Trebuchet. Now, what I noticed here after I started plugging in the stats is that this one is the S variant, not the N, I believe, is the one with the LRMs. So the S is the one with all the SRMs, like crazy amounts of SRMs. 4 damage at medium and short range. That's so crazy with no overheat. But you pay the price tag. It's 40 points for a skill 3, set up in a pursuit role here. So we'll see how this one does. And then you've got the Clint. I love the Clint. It's got a special place in my heart forever. This thing, 24 points. It's dirt cheap. It does damage at long range. It is very under-armored for a 40-ton mech, but it's quick, 6J. It reminds me sort of like that Valkyrie class of mech. Not bad. Key force markers. Well, skills right at 3. Everything's a veteran. That's really good. Your average weighted damage, also very good. So that is coming in exactly at 3. And then armor is 4.5. Structure is 4.5. Armor is concerningly low here. I will say that could be an Achilles heel for this lance. We all know armor is king. Doing damage is great, but being able to take it like a champ is even better. So the Trebuchet, the Catapult, the Clint, the only thing over 5 pips is the Archer. So we'll see. We'll see if that factors in or not. Speed here, you've got a couple of mechs with TMM2, the Treb and the Clint. So we'll see how that does. All right. So let's move on to the individual lance breakdowns. All right, guys. So here we are. Ion Raiders. What do we got? Well, the rated versus actual damage, right? What you observe versus what's expected, I guess you could say. So on the expected side, that's the rated damage. That's the hollow sort of bars, and that's just calculated from the the damage on the cards, right? What percent? So if the Awesome does 3 at short, the Phoenix Hawk, the Marauder, the Rifleman, total damage is X. You look at that over what's the total we can do. That's the percent, right? Very simple. The solid yellow bars are actually what you do in the simulation. So, every turn, every time you shoot, it looks at what range are you at, it adds that into a total, and it's looking at total percent over the course of, all of these simulations, 2,500 games of Alpha Strike run for this particular sim, for this particular analysis, rather. So anyway, I digress. What do we got? Well, we've got very solid damage output at long range. Observed, the rated almost is in line with the actual. The actual is at 13%, rated at 20%. Medium range, obviously exceeding there per usual. So 63% to about 33%. And then short range also within, about 10% of each other. Extreme range was the only one that really jumped out at me as being way under. So these are mechs that can do a lot of damage at extreme range. Again, you've got the Awesome, you've got the Marauder. They can pump out some, what's it, like 3 pips at extreme range. So I was expecting more, but on average, it's really only 1% of their total output. So interesting. Anyway, let's look at the battle metrics. So how did this lance do? Well, it took more damage than it dealt. It dealt 46.7% of the total damage, and it took 53.3% of the total damage. Those things are totally, they're inverse of each other, obviously, because, what the opponent is dealing to you is what the opponent deals, and what you deal to the opponent is what, you get it. So anyway, heat buildup on this lance is good. It's hovering around 2 points of heat by turn 10, turn 9, turn 8. And these are late games where, you're looking for those kills. That's when this engine decides to use the heat, is basically when it wants to get those kill shots. So you're going to see that later in the game. Overall survivability of this lance, 34.8%. It's not bad. When you're in the 30s, that's about what you expect. You've got basically 1.5 mechs left on the table or thereabouts. Not bad. The survivability, though, if you look at the curves, and again, we'll dive into each individual one, there's only one, and you can guess which one that is, that really plummets. The rest of them are pretty decent, and there's a couple that hang pretty high. So we'll dive into those. Interested to see that. If we look at the efficiency analysis, what do we see? Well, the average lance efficiency was 86.6%, so it wasn't terrific. The Awesome hovering around 130%, the Marauder at about 120%, the Rifleman's just about 60%, and that Phoenix Hawk just getting obliterated here, not doing so well, all the way at 35%. So, if you didn't connect the dots here, that's the one that where the survivability just tanks. And it looks like that Phoenix Hawk runs in and just gets blitzed very early. All right, so let's dive into this Awesome. I love everything that I see. We won't spend a ton of time here, but the key takeaways are 20.3% of the damage dealt in this game was dealt by this Awesome. On average would be 12.5%, but this mech, almost doubling that. Really, really great damage output. And it's only taking 11.3% of the damage, 78.8% survivability. If you look at the area chart at the very top there, the battle metrics, what's interesting is it starts taking damage, right? Like turn 4 out of nowhere, like turn 1, 2, 3, it's fine. Turn 4, turn 5, it takes heat. And then it dips down at turn 6, which is interesting because it's not an artifact of one game. This is 2,500 games. This is smoothed out over all of those games. So this isn't like a random thing. So something else is catching the attention of this Op4. Maybe the Rifleman, maybe the Phoenix Hawk gets in range. Something is taking the heat off the Awesome, and then they sort of refocus on it. But frankly, if they would have stayed on it, maybe they could have taken it down. I don't know. It's always a tough decision, right? If you look at the armor analysis, this thing really not seeing too much in terms of internal damage. Late in the game, it starts taking criticals, and on average, it's taking almost 3 criticals a game. So what I'm assuming happens is they're punching through, when they do punch through the armor, it's got so much internal structure. Obviously, you do a pip, you do a pip, you do a pip, you're really generating those criticals. It takes a lot to bring the Awesome down. But overall, very tough mech. Again, the efficiency, fantastic, almost 130%, 129.8. So very, very good return on investment. I think well positioned in the overall, lance. The Marauder also doing very well. So let's talk about the Marauder for a minute. Similar to that Awesome, damage, really good. 17.1% of the overall damage dealt on the table, dealt by this Marauder. It did take 14.2%. So it is definitely they're trying to bring this mech down, and instead of the awesome, they're focusing on this first. It does die. I mean, it dies more than half of the time, so it's alive 43% at turn 10. You look at the armor analysis, it's typically taking critical hits internal by turn 6, turn 7. So overall, though, I think that this mech is doing exactly what you want, right? This is what you expect out of a Marauder. Just get up in the middle, draw some fire, deal some damage, and it's tough at medium range. So I can't complain about this. Efficiency also would agree at 122.3%, so definitely a good ROI on this mech. The Rifleman, on the other hand, would love to see more. The one thing you'll notice, though, is that the heat on this thing extremely high, especially around turn 6, turn 7, and into turn 8. So what you're looking at basically is this. The mech survivability starts to tank. It realizes it is at end of life. It has some kill shots, or it's been killed but one initiative, and it's just unloading. So that's why that heat spike goes up. Probably helps it to recover some damage, but at the end of the day, it's still only doing 5.1%. And, it's tough. You've got a mech that only does 2 damage at short and medium and only 1 at long. That's why I like the 4D for the extra point. You get that extra pip at long. You can also deal some damage at extreme. It is what it is. But, the Rifleman, I was hoping that I would see better survivability numbers on this thing with the direct fire, but only surviving 14.8% of the time. So, again, that efficiency just hurting. But, frankly, not as bad as this Phoenix Hawk. Now, if you remember when we did the last analysis, when I did the Command Lance against the Battle Lance, the Phoenix Hawk 1K, it did so good. It did so good. It blew the doors off everyone because it wasn't focused on. I didn't change any code. The engine does not learn these things, but I think it's a product of the Lance and the role that this mech is in. It was the first one in the door, and they look at it and they're like, 3 points of damage at short, and it's got not that much armor compared to the rest of the mechs on the field. I mean, it is aside from the Rifleman, I mean, it's the smallest mech in terms of armor and structure. I mean, so it just gets lit up, and you can see it starts taking damage on turn 2. It gets blasted. So look at the scaling on the battle metrics there. It goes up to 6. So it gets blasted for 5 points of damage. Again, this is average that it's taking over the simulations. So basically on average, on turn 2 or 3, combined, it's taking like 6 pips. So that means by turn 4, you're already in structure on average. It's taking 2.2 crits a game. It's dead, again, it survives only 2.6% of the time. It's taking 14.8% of the damage. That's a tough sell for that Phoenix Hawk. I think if I were going to do this differently, a couple of things. One, I don't know if Veteran is the right skill level for this mech because it does need to be so close. Maybe you could salvage some points there and upgrade that Rifleman. And then don't put it in a pursuit role. I think a strike role, definitely deployed on the outside, either a second line or a strike role is kind of what you want for this. That's my 2 cents. Let's take a look at the rolling 7s. All right, so rolling 7s, actual versus rated damage, or rated versus actual if I'm reading off the page here. So very similar here. The one thing that jumps out at me is that the long range damage almost exactly matches the actual almost exactly matches the rated. So it's almost living up to the expectation at long range, which is really good. Medium, obviously exceeding, very strong at medium range. But that long range damage is why I think the battle metrics are so high in the early turns of the game, right? You see that gold area very much exceeding on turns, 2 through 6, exceeding the damage taken. And again, if you think about this, guys, I know I've said this 1,000 times, so I'm sorry if it's overwhelming, but you can think of it as like the red area on this chart is the same thing as the gold area on the the Ion Raiders chart, right? They're just corollaries of each other. So this basically is showing you that these guys are outperforming in terms of damage earlier in the game, and it's roughly about the same late game. So they're doing 53% of the damage. They're only taking 46.7, but survivability is lower, 28%. This is important. Why is that? Well, if you remember going back to the force metrics, these guys had very low armor, right? We had the Clint, you had the Trebuchet, the Catapult. The only thing that had a ton of armor was that Archer. This could be a problem. Let's take a look. So if we look at the movement profiles here in the center, this looks like spaghetti. I'm trying to figure out what mech is that. That's the Clint. It's like running around like a madman in the middle there. So the Clint, in this particular simulation, I guess the Clint managed to survive. It looks like all 10 turns. But yeah, the Trebuchet gets in, doing what it's doing. That and the Archer centrally deployed, pushing in, dealing as much damage as they can. That Catapult out on the flank. Interested to see what kind of damage the Catapult can do. Same thing with the Clint. If we look at the efficiency analysis, the Archer and the Catapult both exceeding the expectation. The Lance averaged much higher than the Ion Raiders. The Lance averaged 101.1%. So the Archer, the Catapult, exceeding that. The Trebuchet, about 80%. And then that Clint, just about 60%. So was hoping for more there because they're so cheap. But again, we'll have to see. All right, so let's take a look at the mech by mech. All right, we're going to start with the Archer 2R. Love this mech. So how'd this thing do? Well, surprisingly, the first thing that jumps out at me is there's not more overheating. It does have some heat late in the game, but, largely this thing stays cool, but it does a ton of damage. Guys, 22.3% of the damage attributed to this lone mech, and it only survives about 50% of the time. So that really says something about how much mid-game damage this thing can deliver. Damage taken, very low in that early part of the game. Around turn 7, turn 8, you start to see this thing taking a lot of fire. It does absorb 14.6% of the overall damage that was received. But the scary thing is, like, if you look at the survivability curve, we looked at this on the last screen there. The Archer at 49.6% is higher than every single other mech in the Lance. So that's concerning. They don't really have any survivors in this Lance. That's going to play big into the win-loss ratio. But again, these guys are really doing a ton of damage. So it's going to be a close one. So 142.5% for efficiency. That takes the cake out of all the mechs, I think, in this particular battle. Really well done, well deployed. The Catapult C1, this is our striker. It's out on the left flank. How does it do? Well, very well. 15.1%. You can see it builds up a lot of damage early in the game. It stays fairly consistent with that until about turn 8. And I think that is where it starts to see its demise. But by then it's in medium range. It's able to build up some heat. It's able to do what it needs to do, right? Its average range is 6 inches, which again, we're in 1-to-1, so that's still medium range. Short range is at 3 inches. It's doing overall more damage, right? There's more area under that curve, more damage than it's taking, but it's still taking its share of damage. And, overall not doing bad. It survives about 35.2% of the time. Overall efficiency, just about 120%, 119.2 to be precise. So let's look at the Trebuchet. Was hopeful for this one. It's so close to being good. So this thing basically comes out strong, and you can see sort of through the translucency of the red damage soaked, there's the damage dealt, and it almost meets it. It's almost there, but it just can't dole out as much damage as it's taking. And I'll be honest with you, it's because of the way the engine is programmed. The Op4 looks at this Trebuchet, and they immediately identify it as a threat. I think I said it before, like, it's got 4 pips of armor, 4 pips of structure, and it's doing 4 damage. That's a heck of a lot of damage in this era. So they see that. They're like, dude, this thing's an easy kill. Let's blow this thing out of the water and wipe 4 damage off the table. And that's exactly what happens. I mean, this thing is largely dead by turn 5. You can see the survivability curve just tank. And it only makes it to turn 10 1.2% of the time. So it's definitely identified as a threat and eliminated. And, that is going to happen every single time. And it's why, not that I want to go off on a tangent, but why some of the clan mechs struggle, because, you've got this mech that's like, oh, I have to do 5 damage, I have overheat 4, and it's got like, 5 armor and 3 structure. Of course I'm going to shoot it. Like, I don't want that thing anywhere near me. And this, this trebuchet sort of falls into that same category. It is sort of that, that lightning rod for damage. By turn 3, turn 4 for sure, you're already an internal structure. It's dead by turn 5, turn 6. Oh well. Efficiency, 79.5%. It's not terrible, guys. It's not terrible. For a mech that's dead most of the game, it's still doing pretty good. So it's almost getting a full return on investment. I just think, maybe if you put this thing in a second line role and waited, held it back, not in a pursuit role, but just waited, let some of your other mechs take damage, then get this thing in, that might have been the winner. But I don't know. Let's take a look at the Clint, my favorite. Love the Clint. It's my favorite little mech. It's such a wacky mech. But hey, what are you going to do? So how did this thing do? Well, it's not bad. What's interesting about it is it's like nobody wants to commit to killing it. They just shoot it opportunistically. So that's why the damage taken and damage dealt looks so flat. There's no like giant spike where it's like, we're going to blow this thing out of the water. People are like, well, do I have a shot on anything else? No, I guess I'll shoot the Clint. So, they do a shot here, they do a shot there. So the thing doesn't do bad. I mean, it survives 26% of the time. And for a mech with 5 pips of total armor and structure, I mean, hey, that's not bad. And the armor analysis in the, on the top right there, right below my ugly mug, you can see, it's not, there's no like major inflection point. It's just a pretty steady decline. And, overall, it does okay. I mean, 5.3% in terms of damage isn't great. But for a mech this small, it's kind of like the Rifleman. It's really hard to get that ROI. It's just hard to get it back. So this thing ended up at 63.3%. Not great, not terrible. But, again, in these battles where you've got these titans like Awesomes and like Archers and like Marauders, right? And you have this like little Clint running around, like they're just never going to do good because they're never going to take their chunk of damage because they can't compete with those bigger mechs. I've said it in some of the other Lance reviews. I think a more balanced Lance tends to do a little bit better. I would almost consider running something that's like, I would drop the Trebuchet to skill 4. I would drop this mech to skill 4 and maybe upgrade it to something a little bit bigger. That's all like a Wolverine, like the 6K, if you can fit that, right? Only has short and medium range. You don't need the amazing gunnery. I mean, I know I like to run skill 3, but again, we're in a point constrained type game. So you want to play with those numbers. Anyway, let's take a look at the final results. I'm really interested to see which Lance comes out on top because again, these are very, very close in terms of overall specs and stats. We've got one that does a little bit more damage, one that's a little bit more efficient, so one that survived a lot more. It's interesting to see. So stick around, guys. All right, guys, here we are, the final comparison of the Ion Raiders against the Rolling Sevens. This was a great matchup. Let's take a look at the key force markers. We have skill, weighted damage, armor, structure, and speed. So what do we see here? Well, the dark green line is the Rolling Sevens, the light green line is the Ion Raiders, and the thing that stands out the most is that armor and structure. And we saw that sort of bleed through into the survivability metrics, right? The Ion Raiders at 34.8% survivability, the Rolling Sevens at 28% survivability. So definitely a big and tangible impact there. If we look at our Battlytics stats in the left-hand side, average range actually for these was identical. Rolling Sevens just delivered so much more damage, over the course of the game. I mean, I say so much damage. I mean, I guess it's only 4 points, but again, that's half of a mech in some cases. Also, Rolling Sevens delivered more critical hits and had a higher hit percent at 61% versus the Ion Raiders at 56%. But those Ion Raiders getting more kills, 2.9 per game versus the 2.6 for the Rolling Sevens. That combined with the survivability, that's going to lead to 54% of the wins going to the Ion Raiders. So very close, very, very close. I mean, razor thin margins here, a couple of hundred simulations. They did have a couple of draws as well, like dead even, where all the mechs were dead at the, basically, end of the turn, everything's dead, which is pretty spectacular. Those are pretty rare. So very, very close matchup. Congratulations to John and the Ion Raiders. They get to advance into the second round. Some tough competition waiting there. Those seeded teams that got a bye round. So we'll see. And then, of course, the Rolling Sevens, awesome lance design. Really loved it. Love the Archer Catapult combo. Love the way you deployed the mechs. I mean, I don't think you did anything wrong here. Just a tough matchup against those Ion Raiders. I mean, again, the only real things I would change, consider upgrading that Clint or even the Trebuchet to some degree. Get a little bit more armor on the table in this lance. I think that's kind of the Achilles heel for this particular lance. And on John's side, I think he's going to have some tough challenges ahead. We'll see. I think the Awesome and the Marauder tandem very good, but that Phoenix Hawk, I think you have it in the wrong role and you can't change it. It's locked in for the tournament. But I digress, as per usual. Guys, I'm wrapping this one up. I'm cutting myself off. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. A couple public service announcements. Number one, guys, please, if you have not subscribed, do so. What you gotta do is just click the button. It's free. Click the little bell so it notifies you when we drop new videos. If you want to get more involved, guys, we are over on Patreon. That's where this tournament is taking place. $1 a month is all it takes. That's the minimum buy-in to get on Patreon. You can get involved in the conversations and the horsing around that we do. We post up sneak peeks. We post up all sorts of great stuff. So definitely check that out. There's a $5 tier. We can access our digital toolkit. And then, of course, the $10 tier where you get access to the veteran challenges and other special privileges as well. So all that said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Again, I cannot express how much I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, leave a comment, let us know what you think. Would love to hear about it. And of course, you saw me in some of the other videos flash up the bracket. Also on Facebook, I've posted pictures of the bracket. So as I release more, I will probably very shortly be releasing all of the winners from round 1 and the round 2 matchups. So definitely check that out as well. But that's it. Guys, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a good night.